What's up, fight fans? This is Danny Howard from FightUp.com, and this is the Pillar to Post video podcast. Got a lot of stuff for you this week, so let's get started. So now that Lamont Peterson and Andre Berto are out for opponents for Amir Khan and Victor Ortiz due to them either failing but passing or passing but failing their random drug testing, both fighters have now gotten their fights rescheduled and are ready to go for summer bouts. Victor Ortiz was initially supposed to meet Andre Berto on June 23rd at the Staples Center, but thankfully Josito Lopez has stepped in to save the date at Staples, and the fight will go on as scheduled for June 23rd. Lopez isn't a bad fighter, but he's been inactive. The last time we saw Lopez was on the undercard of Mayweather-Ortiz, losing by split decision to Jesse Vargas. It's an interesting way this fight fell into place because Lopez was actually supposed to fight former junior welterweight champion Kendall Holt the night before on Friday Night Fights. But Holt didn't want to fight in San Jacinto outdoors in the middle of the desert, basically, when the weather is probably going to be around 90 degrees. I really can't blame Holt. I mean, I'm here in California in Burbank, actually, and I'm sweating my ass off, so I can only imagine what it would be like fighting out in the desert. So, in the end, Lopez does fit in quite nicely. He should have a good couple of weeks to get ready for the fight, come in a little heavier, and I think that Lopez-Ortiz is going to be a decent little scrap. Lopez comes to fight. Ortiz isn't necessarily a boxer either, so the fight should be as good as it lasts. Now, what could be interesting about that fight is that Lopez likes to come forward and pressure, and we've all seen how Ortiz does, especially when he can't find a way to hurt a guy. He just loses his composure, and the fight goes down south in a hurry. So we'll have to see how that fight turns out. Personally, I'm actually happy the card's still going on because Lucas Matisse and Humberto Soto are still going to be on the undercard, and I think that fight is worth the price of admission alone. And I'm very much looking forward to June 23rd here at Staples. Should be a very, very good night of boxing. Now, Amir Khan has sealed the date for July 14th to face off against WBC junior welterweight champion Danny Garcia. That actually is also another good fight. It's going to be on an HBO doubleheader, which will be co-main evented by Seth Mitchell versus Jonathan Banks. Khan Garcia is really an interesting fight. I'm actually shocked that Golden Boy would put Danny Garcia in with Amir Khan right away. But I think that Garcia and Khan are flawed in the ways that they can both make an interesting fight. A lot of people, though, are very apprehensive to Garcia being the guy that Khan's fighting. People were saying they would rather see him fight, Khan fight Maidana again or Bretis Prescott. I mean, are you guys kidding me? I mean, Maidana, we last saw, got pretty much boxed circles around, by Devin Alexander, and Bretis Prescott got knocked the hell out by Mike Alvarado. These guys have not been doing anything lately. I think that, we have two young champions fighting each other, and we should actually be happy that they're going to be fighting each other. How frequently in boxing nowadays do we actually get two young, up-and-coming champions, duking it out? Garcia's going to come forward and fight. Amir Khan can't fight going backwards, and he can't fight on the inside. So these guys are going to make a pretty decent scrap out of it. So I think that's actually a great fight. I think it's going to be an excellent fight. And I think that both of those fights, Ortiz-Lopez, Khan, Garcia, I think that's excellent thinking on their feet in the terms of Golden Boy Promotions for basically making lemonade out of lemons, man. I do tip my hat off to them. And on the July 14th card, too, with Seth Mitchell and Jonathan Banks, Jonathan Banks is not the most fun fighter to watch. Seth Mitchell is pretty much the great American hope or hype, whichever you guys prefer. But I definitely think that there might be an upset potential in that fight. Banks is not going to come to fight Seth Mitchell. He's going to come to box, and we'll see how Mitchell does against an opponent who's really not there to get wiped out. So two very, very intriguing nights of boxing, and I am very much looking forward to it, as should all of you guys. So on September 15th, Saul Canelo Alvarez will be defending his junior middleweight title against former welterweight champion Paul the Punisher Williams on what is supposed to be Saul Canelo Alvarez's HBO pay-per-view headlining debut. I think that this is actually a pretty good fight. I think that Alvarez is, he's getting better. I'm still not a fan of his, but I think that Paul Williams is definitely a good choice for him. Williams has been in there with very, very good fighters. He hasn't really won me over yet. I mean, I think that there's less left in the tank that we're led to believe when it comes to Paul. But this should be a very, very good fight. Alvarez comes to fight. Paul Williams can only throw punches and doesn't know how to keep his hands up. These guys are not going to move backwards. And it should be a very, very interesting night of boxing. I don't know how the rest of the card is going to shape up. From what I've been hearing, Golden Boy Promotions is trying very hard to get Alfredo Angulo on the card, trying to get his immigration issues kind of cleared out. And there's a good chance that Eric Morales may also show up on the pay-per-view scheduled to air Mexico Independence Day weekend. Now, I'm going to reserve my judgment on the Alvarez-Williams fight until we kind of get closer to the event. But I would love to hear what you guys have to think about the fight. So please make sure you email me with your thoughts and comments on Canelo Alvarez versus Paul Williams. Is it a good fight? Is it a bad fight? Who do you think is going to win? Does this fight tell us anything about the guys that we don't already know? I'll be posting my favorite responses next week as I open the video mailbag, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. But as of right now, I would say mark the calendars. I think September 15th is going to be a very entertaining pay-per-view debut for Canelo Alvarez as he faces off against Paul the Punisher Williams. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I'm actually very excited for this weekend's super middleweight clash between Carl the Cobra Froch and the Canadian Colossus Lucian Bute for Bute's IBF super middleweight title. Froch and Bute are still two very, very highly ranked super middleweights in a division that's pretty much on reward than everybody else. But this is still one of the best fights that can be made, not only in the 168-pound division, but also in boxing as well. There are a lot of people that are still scratching their heads about Lucian Bute, and I think this fight with Carl Froch is pretty much going to be the measuring stick for him. Now, Froch has been in some pretty big fights in the division over the past couple of years. He's beaten Jean Pascal, Jermaine Taylor, Andre Durrell, Arthur Abraham, and his only losses in his career at this point has come to Mikhail Kessler and Andre Ward, two very, very good fighters. Now, Lucian Bute has a lot less mileage on him. He's a very, very tough fighter, and though he hasn't fought the degree of competition that Froch has, he also hasn't really struggled that much with them either. Outside of the disastrous first fight with Librado Andrade, when Bute probably should have been knocked out, Bute rectified it by KOing Andrade out knocking Andrade out in the fourth round of their rematch. This is going to be a very intriguing fight. I think that Lucian Bute should win this fight because I think Froch just has a lot of mileage on him. It's not that Froch loses his fights, it's that he usually gets beaten up. I mean, the Kessler fight was a war. He was beaten up pretty good by Jermaine Taylor when they fought before he knocked Taylor out. And he was fighting on pretty even terms with Glenn Johnson until Johnson really just got tired around the 9th or 10th round. And the dude's 35 years old, and I don't see how Froch is going to beat a guy that has really power in both hands. He's a southpaw. He's a good body puncher. And I think that he can make it interesting, at least more competitive, than the Andre Ward fight, in which I didn't give Froch a round. But at the end of the day, I do think that barring any type of hometown controversy or, ridiculous garbage from what I'm already expecting from the UK referees and the judges, that Lucian Bute should win this fight rather easily. I actually don't think he's going to stop Froch, but I do think he might drop him. But at the end of the day, I'm going to take Lucian Bute over Carl Froch by decision and retain his super middleweight title. Now, I don't know where this actually leaves Bute. A lot of people wanted to see him fight Andre Ward, which really is a natural fight. But now with Ward signing up with HBO to presumably fight Chad Dawson this September, and Bute still having one more fight left on his Showtime contract, it's very unlikely that Bute and Ward will fight. I think that the next fight for Lucian Bute, or even Carl Froch, should he win and there's no rematch between the two, will be either against Mikhail Kessler or Kelly Pavlik. Now, Bute has been in talks to fight both fighters at one time, but those fights fell apart due to the fact that Kessler had one of his many injuries over the past couple of years, and Kelly Pavlik has either lost the fight to Sergio Martinez, or he's been, well, drunk. I mean, it's really hard to say. So it's an interesting fight that will really open up the floodgates for potential fights. It's 168 or 175 pounds, and I'm very much looking forward to it. So I think that it's going to be a good fight as well. So I would check it out. So again, I'm picking Lucian Bute by decision over a game, but overmatched, Carl the Cobra Froch. Well, that about does it for me on the Pillar Post video podcast this week. So please be sure to leave your comments below. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can add me on Twitter at dbhoward126. You can email me directly at dhoward@fighthype.com. And always be sure to dial it in to fighthype.com for your latest boxing and MMA news. I'll see you guys at the fights this weekend, and until then, have a good one.